Welcome back to the Grep News Podcast. I'm Bam Rather, and our show today is about how cracks are forming inside Trump's own party over his Iran war, with 4 Republicans breaking ranks to hand the House a historic 215 to 208 vote that could put the brakes on the conflict. 2 weeks ago, the Speaker of the House looked at his whip count, didn't like what he saw, and sent everybody home. That's the detail I keep coming back to. Mike Johnson had a war powers resolution on Iran heading for the floor. He had 4 Republicans either publicly committed or quietly telling leadership they were ready to cross over. And rather than let it come to a vote he was going to lose, he gavelled the chamber out early for recess. Members went home. They talked to constituents. They filled up their cars. They came back this week, and not one of them changed their mind. The vote was 215 to 208. 4 Republicans crossed. Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Tom Barrett of Michigan, Warren Davidson of Ohio, and Thomas Massie of Kentucky. It is the first time in this war, 3 months and counting, that either chamber of Congress has formally voted to take the war-making power back from this president. The procedural maneuver designed to bury the rebuke became the proof that the rebuke was unkillable. I want to walk you through how we got here because the chronology matters. At the end of February, the United States joined Israel in launching strikes on Iran. The previous supreme leader was killed. His son, Mojtaba, succeeded him. Within days, Hezbollah fired into northern Israel, and Israel rolled into southern Lebanon. By mid-April, there was a nominal U.S.-Iran ceasefire, described in every account I read as uneasy and uncertain. The administration's legal position rests on that ceasefire. Their argument is that because hostilities have ceased, the 60-day clock in the War Powers Act simply doesn't apply. The president didn't need congressional authorization because, by their reading, there's no longer a war to authorize. Here's the problem with that argument. On Tuesday, Iran fired missiles at Kuwait and Bahrain. The U.S. struck an Iranian facility on Keshem Island in response. On Wednesday, the same day the House voted, Iranian drones hit Kuwait International Airport, killed an Indian national, wounded 63 people, and prompted Kuwait to expel 2 Iranian diplomats. Kuwait says it shot down more than a dozen missiles and a similar number of drones. The president himself, asked about the ceasefire, said, and I am quoting, "I'd say in that part of the world a ceasefire is when you're shooting in a more moderate manner." That is, the commander-in-chief, on the record, describing the legal predicate of his own war powers position as essentially shooting, but politely. That sentence is the entire administration legal brief. It is also, I should note, not a sentence any court has ever recognized as a defense. This is where the turn comes in. And it's the part of the story I think is getting underplayed. Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick was asked to explain his vote. He didn't give an anti-war speech. He didn't denounce the strikes. He said this: "We're past the 60 days, so you have 2 choices. You either follow the law or you change the law. You can't violate the law. That's not an option." That framing is what makes this vote so hard for leadership to whip against. Fitzpatrick isn't positioning himself as a dove. He's positioning himself as a strict constructionist. The War Powers Act, passed over Nixon's veto in the wake of Vietnam, says the president has 60 days to get congressional sign-off on hostilities, with a 30-day extension. We are more than 90 days in. Fitzpatrick's argument is simply, the statute is the statute. And once you reframe a defection vote as procedural compliance rather than political dissent, you've taken the partisan teeth out of the discipline machine. There's nothing for Johnson to threaten. Johnson's counter on the floor was historical. He said, quote, "Iran declared war on us 47 years ago. They chant death to America. The president is trying to keep the people safe." That is a hostage crisis argument from the Carter administration. It is not a 60-day clock argument. The 2 sides of this debate are not actually arguing about the same thing. One side is reading the U.S. Code. The other side is reading a history book opened to the wrong chapter. Now, layer on what's happening around the vote. On Monday, Trump called Benjamin Netanyahu. According to reports of that conversation, he called the Israeli prime minister crazy. And the call was, in the language of the reporting, expletive-laced. The president later acknowledged the description and pivoted to, "I like Bibi a lot." Netanyahu, asked about it on CNBC, said, "We always find a way to work out our differences." Two quotes, same week. One head of state calls the other crazy. The other says they work it out. The contradiction is the diplomacy. That same Monday, an Israeli airstrike on the Lebanese town of Qiyam killed 6 members of the al-Abdallah family. A 13-year-old named Ahmed was the only survivor. His uncle Isa told a reporter, "What good is talking now? They are gone, and nothing will bring them back. This land costs blood." Also Monday, Trump, Johnson, Vice President Vance, and Secretary Rubio met for 3 hours at the White House. We don't know what they decided. Johnson has been referring publicly to a final peace on reopening the Strait of Hormuz. He has not said what that peace is or who's negotiating it. I went looking. There is no readout. There is no leak. There is a speaker using the word final about a war his caucus just voted to constrain, and a press corps that has not yet pried open what he means by it. That is the missing piece of this coverage, and I want to flag it rather than fill it in. Underneath all of it, the economic pressure that Congressman Gregory Meeks, the top Democrat on foreign affairs, named explicitly on the floor. Quote, "The people are tired of suffering because of his war of choice, suffering at the gas pump, suffering at the supermarkets." Oil closed up more than 4% earlier this week on reports that the U.S.-Iran talks had stalled and the strait could stay choked. The president himself has acknowledged Hormuz might not reopen before Labor Day. This is the coalition math the White House is trying to hold. A president who campaigned, more than anything else, on ending foreign entanglements is now 3 months into a foreign entanglement, with his own party's House majority voting to constrain him, with gas prices visible on every corner, with the Israeli prime minister he just called crazy continuing to strike Lebanon, with Gulf allies getting hit by drones, and with the constitutional question of who actually controls American war-making sitting on the Senate's desk. Because that's the next move. Last month, the Senate advanced its own parallel war powers measure, and 4 Republican senators broke with the president on it. If majority leadership schedules the final vote and it passes, the resolution goes to the president's desk. He will almost certainly veto. And then, we are in territory the country has not been in since the Nixon administration. A sitting Congress, including members of the president's own party, formally attempting to terminate a war their president is prosecuting, and a president vetoing that termination on the grounds that the underlying statute is itself unconstitutional. That is the constitutional showdown the War Powers Act was written to force, and it has never actually been fully forced, until, possibly, now. Here's what stopped me. The administration's whole legal theory is that the ceasefire holds, so the clock doesn't run. And yet, on the day the House voted, Iranian drones were hitting an airport in Kuwait, and the United States was striking a facility on Qeshm Island. 2 reports, 2 different wars. Only one of them can be the one we're legally in. Here's what I know now that I didn't when I started pulling the timeline. I knew the House had rebuked the president. I didn't know that the rebuke had survived a deliberate, engineered effort by his own speaker to suffocate it in the crib. The recess was the test. 2 weeks at home, 2 weeks of constituent meetings, 2 weeks of gas station receipts. Johnson sent them home, betting that distance would soften them. They came back harder. The one question worth watching is whether the Senate moves, and how fast. 4 Republican senators are already on the record. If their majority leader brings the bill to the floor and it passes, this president will face a choice no modern president has faced in quite this form. Veto a bipartisan congressional termination of his own war, and dare the Supreme Court to decide who actually holds the war power. 2 weeks ago, a speaker sent the House home to kill a vote. This week, the House came back and held it anyway. That is not symbolism. That is a chamber telling its own president that the 60-day clock ran out, and it noticed. Share this story to support investigative AI-powered news, and learn more at grep.news.
Grep News. Thomas.